Hello, welcome to the Knife Yak channel. Today's topic of discussion is handle ergonomics. And I'm going to discuss this today with a particular frame of reference being the Cold Steel American Lawman. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to describe the ergonomics of the American Lawman. I'm going to identify some advantages and disadvantages of the handle shape that's unique to this knife. It's this one here. And I'm going to make some comparisons to several other knives, and we're going to, in the process, figure out some basic principles that relate to handle ergonomics in general. So stay tuned. Okay, first I'm going to talk about this American Lawman, and I'll preface this by saying that I carved a tri-stick with this knife. This is a new knife that I acquired just a few days ago, and I gave it a really good workout by carving one of my tri-sticks. I oftentimes use the tri-stick as a way of testing the ergonomics and basic functionality of a new knife that I acquire. So as you can see, I write the name of the knife used and the date, and as I carve the various notches in the tri-stick, I just make mental note about what feels good and what doesn't feel very good. And the tri-stick is a good test because it takes quite a while to carve one. And so if all you do is just open a letter or cut a sandwich in half or sharpen a pencil, you're not going to use the knife long enough to really find out what it does and how it feels. And so the tri-stick is it requires some fairly hard pressure to cut the wood. This poplar wood is fairly firm. It's not hard like hickory or desert ironwood or anything like that, but it's fairly firm. And when you carve it, sorry, I just knocked my camera over there. When you carve it, you have to press really hard. And if there's any hot spots or any points or peaks or any unfinished edges, they'll show up when you're carving the stick. And it takes more than an hour for me to carve one of these. And in this case, I didn't keep track of the time, but it took probably closer to 2 hours by the time I finished this thing. And so with that experience, I think I have some insights or comments that I'd like to share, ideas and opinions about this particular handle and its strengths and weaknesses. But for me, before I even bought this knife, I was interested in how this peak right here would fare in this kind of hard use cutting task. And there's this secondary peak over here that could also be a problem. It's good to have this kind of a shape, I guess, with an indentation for the index finger, because it really does keep your hand on the handle. And if you're stabbing things or poking and pushing, and I don't know, if you're in Mortal Kombat with a mountain lion or something, I guess you really do want to keep the knife in your hand, right? So that's what this is for, right? So this is like a guard, and it keeps your hand off of the blade when you're stabbing into things. But the problem is, oftentimes you're not stabbing into things, and the knife, in fact, is stabbing into you. So as I'm carving my tri-stick, I don't usually use the kind of grip that I think many handles are designed for. And what I mean by that is, you can tell because there's always, knives oftentimes nowadays have jimping up here on the handle above the pivot area. And you see that in a lot of knives. So here we have a Benchmade bug out, and you see we got the jimping right here, right? And we have this Benchmade 710 axis lock, McHenry and Williams, and you have this thumb ramp right here. So obviously all the knife makers in the world pretty much seem to agree that you're supposed to put your thumb up here on top. And sometimes I do, but I usually don't. In fact, most of the time my grip is not with the thumb up here on the spine, but rather with my hand wrapped around the handle like that, in what I call a gorilla grip, especially for any kind of hard use cutting. For light use cutting, I'm more likely to hold my thumb on the side of the handle like that. And so let's let's go back to our American Lawman here. So as I'm carving my tri-stick and using my Gorilla Grip to really forcefully carve the wood, when you have to really push into it. Now let's look and see what happens. When I open my hand, you see where that peak is right there? And you see that hole or that dent that it just made in my middle finger? So the problem is this indentation right here is too narrow for my hand. And I'm guessing that if you have a larger, beefier, thicker hand with stubbier fingers than what I have, maybe one finger would fit in there, and this peak would fit between your index and your middle finger, and it would be awesome. Feels great like that. But when I choke up on the knife to get hard pressure cutting with good leverage, I want to shift forward. And I find that I want to put my index finger as far forward as I can. And if I put it just behind that little peak right there, there's not enough room for both fingers. And so the middle finger ends up being right on that little secondary point right there. So when I squeeze that hard, I'm basically poking a hole in my finger, the base of my finger right there. And I can shift forward if I put my index finger in this choil area up here by the blade. So there's obviously a curve here that's intended to accommodate the index finger when you choke up, and that puts the big nasty peak between my two fingers, the index and the middle finger, and so I can squeeze really hard. And now when I open my hand, guess what? See, now we get the pain is right in the middle of my ring finger. So you can see that. Look how that orients right in the middle of the fleshy part of my ring finger. And that's not comfortable when I squeeze the knife hard. I'm pushing hard to make that cut, right? So let's talk about other grips. In a chest lever grip, where you might be holding the blade reversed like this with this arc right here, will fall into this kind of webbing part of my thumb right here, which is actually quite comfortable. And then this peak right here, the secondary peak, it mashes into my flesh, but it's not bony flesh. There's not a finger. This finger bone is not up here, and so it's just kind of squishing into soft tissue. So it's not as painful. It's actually quite good in that respect. So that's not a problem there, right? If I do what do you call this, reverse or ice pick grip like that, like you're stabbing things, I squeeze hard, I'm still getting this peak right here is still finding part of my the base of my ring finger. So that one's not terribly comfortable either. Now, the problems that I'm talking about, I think, are made or intensified by the fact that this handle not only has peaks in some inconvenient places, but the handle is also fairly broad and fairly thin. And let's hold it like this so you can see better. So the handle itself is very thin, and if we compared it to the Benchmade 710, you can see the handle is thinner, and it's also broader, right? So it's just a wider handle. So you have to bring your hand around it farther, and that means that when you do squeeze it, it pokes into you more because your hand is kind of stretched out, right? So if you could wrap your hand all the way around the handle, like on this bug out, it's not going to hurt. So not only is there no peak here, it's also easier to get your hand around it without pressing into the edges of the handle scales. So when you choose your handles, you want them to be secure so they don't cause your hand to slide up onto the blade when you cut yourself, right? And you want also to not have the knife gouge into your flesh. And so it's a compromise, right? And, everybody makes the choices they make because, they have their own priorities. But I tend to prioritize versatility over really aggressive handle configurations that force your hand to comply with a very specific type of grip. Now, I think I mentioned this a minute ago, but when I'm cutting stuff, I'm hardly ever putting my thumb up here on the ramp. And so with this, I guess you call this a Saber grip, where you put your thumb up on top of the spine like that, right? And that can be a useful grip. When I'm carving my tri-stick, I might use that kind of a grip when I'm making these piercing kind of cuts in order to make the square hole like that. You have to wedge that point in there and just push and push really hard. So I can do it. I can in fact put my thumb up on the spine part of the either the blade or the handle, just to, because that's the way my hand is oriented when I'm making that cut, right? So I will do that. Sometimes I'll put my thumb to the side and just push like that, right? So it's not like I never put my thumb up here. It's just that I don't usually, and I think people kind of assume that. So I know when I look at knives in a knife shop, one of the first things I do is I put it in my hand and I hold it like that. And I go, "Ooh, that feels really good. Isn't that great? Oh man, that's great. Oh, look at the ergos on this thing. It's so awesome." But what happens is I'm holding my index finger kind of diagonally. It's not going like this. It's going like this. Sorry, I was not on camera there. So it's not perpendicular, but rather oblique like that. So when you close your hand, the finger really does take up the entire groove, right? But when I use my preferred grip, it's like this. It just isn't that. That's just not what I get, right? So let's do a little comparison. This is to me a fairly obvious but interesting comparison. The American Lawman with the Spyderco Manix 2, because they both have this very prominent index finger arch. As you can see here, they're very similar, right? And they both have this little they both have the primary peak up here just behind the choil area. So we get our choil, we get this peak, you get your choil here and the same peak, right? With the similar kind of a groove here and a similar kind of groove here with the peak in between, right? So these are very similar. But if I put these knives up, I'm going to stand these up like this, and I'll put them kind of right next to each other, choil to choil and peak to peak. And I'm going to, I'm going to actually remove the camera from my tripod here. And I'm going to put the tripod here out of the way and change my outlook on life here. So if we look at these two knives lined up next to each other, you can see that the size of everything is very comparable. The choil is a similar size arc, as is the this indentation here. This part right here, same similar size. But what you'll notice is that the peak on the Lawman is pointy, and the peak on the Manix 2 is slightly rounded and not quite as tall. Let's get down here where you can see this. There you go. So you can kind of see that the pointy peak is not only more pointy, but it's also slightly more prominent. And the thing that really makes a difference is this one right here, because it's not really it's not much of a larger arc, but it's a shallower arc, and it just means that this part right here is just a lot less aggressive, right? Now, Spyderco really has this figured out. In many of their knives that have the finger choil up here, you'll notice that this section here is very flat. It's a very elegant curve that allows your finger to go pretty much anywhere on the handle, right? And so when you hold this knife in your hand, it not only is there nothing there to poke your middle finger, or if you're choked up, nothing to poke your ring finger, but your fingers can pretty much just go anywhere. And when if I had to muscle up with my Gorilla Grip to do the hard cutting on a tri-stick or whatever, or cutting some thick cardboard or whatever, I can put my thumb up here, right? Or I can put my thumb back here. Everything's great. Or I could just not put my thumb on the spine area at all, but just muscle up like that, and it just doesn't hurt as much, right? Now, a very similar, here's an interesting comparison. So this is the Spyderco, sorry. This is the Spyderco Stretch 2. And you'll notice that the handle shape and the blade shape are quite similar to the PM2. But in this case, whereas the PM2 has a rather squared, kind of boxy, angular kind of a handle slab, this one's all contoured, chamfered, and radiused. And so in the hand, this curved, beveled area here, that radius curved area is just super comfortable. Fingers go, you can get both fingers into that area there, right? And the middle finger is accommodated. The ring finger isn't accommodated, but there's nothing there to poke it, right? So that's good. If I choke up, feels awesome. Not feeling any pain at all. I mean, it's just firm, good, secure grip, right? Let's look at this 710 axis lock from Benchmade. Now you'll notice that this one doesn't have any peaks at all. It's just one great big, nice, gentle curve, which accommodates any number of fingers perfectly. And there's no, you still get the effect of a guard here because of that, the way this curves up like that. It does protect your hand from sliding up onto the blade. Now, there's no choil here, or I'm like, yeah, there's a choil. I mean, there's no arched ricasso kind of Spyderco style choil up here. But guess what? It's got the jimping up here, as if you are, in fact, supposed to put your fingers up there, or your index finger should go up there. Otherwise, I can see no reason why you would have this jimping up here forward of the place where your finger would go, unless your finger is supposed to go there. And that actually works quite well also. Now, I think these finger choils, as we see on the American Lawman and on the Manix, I'm talking about this choil right here, right? On the PM2 and a host of other Spyderco knives, you don't need that very much. And I've found that if you compare the Spyderco knives that don't have this arched 50-50 choil, such as the Endura or the Indela, you can still put your fingers up there and wrap them around like that, and it works just about as well as if you had that choil. So that's just something that I think people overlook. And if you need to squeeze, if the lack of this kind of a choil is bothersome, when you're squeezing hard and cutting, you can just kind of relax the grip slightly with your index finger and just do most of the hard pressure with the other fingers, and that takes the pressure off of any angle here that would get in the way. Now I'll show you what I mean by that here in a second when we look at another knife. So here's a Reeve Sebenza, and the handles that they're putting on the current Sebenza 31. This is the large Sebenza. The large Sebenza 31 nowadays doesn't have this kind of serrated kind of a handle edge, right? There's and this curved area here is more like a semicircle on the current design. I don't have one of the new ones, but if anybody wants to donate one to the channel, let me know. So this is really excellent. I love it because when you squeeze it, in my preferred Gorilla Grip, nothing hurts. It feels quite awesome. If I want to choke up on the knife like this, I can. And in this case, there's no arched ricasso, but there is some space there where you can put your finger, and you just don't squeeze too tight with your index finger, and that way you don't have to worry about this corner right here, right? So you can squeeze up on it. It works great. It works great like this. Works great like that. Works great like that. It's just a fairly neutral handle. So it has a lot of accommodations and little features here, but none of them are contrary to the way the hand actually works, right? And in fact, of course, there is jimping up here, right? Reeve apparently assumed that people want to put their thumb there, And maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't, but regardless, the knife feels good in my hand for the grips that I normally use. Now, you saw me review this a couple of weeks ago. The Buck 791 Range Pro. This one has the FRN handle with great texture. So check this out. It has the we have this swell here that functions like a guard, right? So that's awesome. And then we have, you can see, if unfortunately my background is green and the handle is also green, but you can see that there is actually a little secondary peak right here. So that corresponds to this peak on the American Lawman. But which of these knives do you think is going to be more comfortable? You get it. It's obviously the Buck. I want to keep saying Benchmade. The Buck is very good in the hand. You can put your fingers anywhere on there and it just feels great. Saber grip. The jimping's not too effective on this knife, but there it is. The Gorilla grip works great. You can use your Saber grip, works great. Reverse grip, chest lever grip. So whoever invented this handle seems to be the kind of person that actually tried using the knife. Now here's a less common or less well-known knife. This is this CMB made Predator. Again, we don't have an arched ricasso here, but there is a choil that's rather prominent, and that gives you a gap between the end of the handle and the beginning of the blade edge. But that works like a choil as long as you don't squeeze too tight with your index finger, because you don't want to cut yourself, right, by getting that little heel area of the blade like embedded in your finger. But if you hold it back like this with the intended grip, see, oh, by the way, this knife doesn't have any jimping at all, which is actually quite refreshing. But in the the Saber grip with your thumb on top of the spine, it feels great. So it accommodates your finger diagonally like that, right? In my Gorilla grip, feels great. If I open my hand, you can see it easily accommodates both of my fingers, and the ring finger is nowhere near anything like a peak. There is a peak there, but look, it's very shallow and kind of rounded and not as prominent. So let's go back to our American Lawman. Yeah, guess which one's more comfortable? Okay, so and the world famous bug out, right? The bug out is ideal for the kind of general principle that I would teach somebody who doesn't know much about what kind of knife they want to buy and maybe can't go to the store and try them all out in hand. If I were advising somebody to the best all-around, most versatile kind of handle would be something that's fairly neutral like this one. So you get some swell here to keep your finger off the blade. It's awesome, right? But your hand can go anywhere. It's just very versatile. Feels great. And yeah, your hand doesn't have to compromise because the handle does that instead, right? So anyway, I do like the American Lawman. It's a great knife. It's very robust. Here in a few days, I'm going to do a follow-up review based on all the things I've learned. Now, I just wanted to talk about the ergos. Maybe by the time I make the next video on the American Lawman, this knife might look just a little bit different than it does now. I'm probably going to file off this peak right here just to make it a little less prominent and round it off a bit. And I'm going to take this curve here and I'm going to move it back a little bit, and in the process round off this secondary peak and just kind of widen this arc and just make it just less painful, right? Because even right now, just squeezing that gently, I'm still feeling that digging right in to the base of my middle finger. So that's what I'm going to do, I think. Anyway, all I have to say about this for now. And thank you for tuning in. I appreciate your participation in the comments, and if you haven't already, remember to subscribe. And I'll see you next time.